When we remember the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, there's a tendency sometimes to remember the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in such a way as to make an invidious comparison between the brave fighters who saved the honor of the Jewish people and then the masses of Jews who let themselves be killed. We tend to emphasize the heroes. And if we look at the Warsaw Ghetto Memorial in Warsaw, designed by Nathan Rappaport, we see that tension. One side of the monument, the fighters, the heroes, guns. On the other side, poor Jews being herded off to their death. And we have to keep in mind that there were other kinds of resistance. The basic kind of resistance was to remember that since the Germans wanted to crush you and humiliate you, you had to, on some level, as much as you could, say no. And they were very good at making you feel humiliated. But saying no and doing your best to remember that you were a human being is very important. Another kind of resistance was children, to educate children, to act as if the children were going to survive, to teach them, to prepare textbooks. A third kind of resistance was literature and poetry. In the Vilna Ghetto, Avram Sutzkever, believing that even in the face of death, at least for him, the poem can survive. A beautiful poem, a fashioned poem, would last even in the face of death. His baby son was murdered at 1 day old. And Sutzkever wrote a poem. Sutzkever was hiding in a wooden coffin and wrote poems. Sutzkever wrote poetry entitled Under Your White Stars. Unter deine weiße Stern streckt zu mir dein weiße Hand. Under your white stars, stretch out your white hand to me. My words are tears. They want to rest in your hand. Even if I don't survive, my words somehow will survive. There was song. In the ghettos, the distance between the individual and the community really began to shrink. And songs were composed and they were sung. At first, some of these songs radiated a determination to survive. No matter what. Mordechai Gebirtig, one of the most beloved songwriters in pre-war Poland, who was in the Krakow ghetto, wrote a song called Minuten von Betochen, and the refrain was Treibt uns von die Diere, schneit uns ab die Berg, jeden soll sein freilich, wir haben sie in Dreher, which means you can throw us out of our homes, you can cut off our beards, which is what the Germans were doing then. They hadn't yet started to kill you, but you can cut off our beards, Jews be happy, they can go to hell. For some Jews, a basic form of resistance was, despite all odds, observance of the mitzvot, observance of halacha, lighting a Hanukkah menorah, no matter how difficult. I remember my mother once telling me that in the early days of the German occupation, a German official, and she had to work as a cleaning lady in the commandant's place, seemed to be a nice guy and actually gave her a big piece of chicken to take home. And her mother got very upset when she brought the chicken home. How could you bring unkosher meat into our house? What, the German, because of the Germans, you're gonna start eating unkosher meat. This too, I think, was a form of resistance. The struggle to make sense of this from the point of view of Jewish thinking, the sermons of the Piaseczner Rebbe. The last Yom Kippur in the Lodz Ghetto in 1943, which fell out on a Shabbos, and Rumkowski got the Germans to allow that to be a holiday. And that last Yom Kippur, the ghetto tried to dress a little better, families walked together. It was a demonstration of some kind of solidarity and recognition that this was a holy day. Another critically important kind of resistance, something I wrote my book about, was documentation, leave a trace, leave time capsules. Emanuel Ringelblum, the Onyx Shabbos Archive, the archive of the Lodz Ghetto, under the crematoria in Auschwitz-Birkenau, two religious Jews, rabbis, who were in the Sonderkommando, left their memoirs and their observations. Self-help, setting up soup kitchens, running house committees, helping your neighbor. A ghetto theater in the Vilna ghetto. At first, when Gen said organize a theater, people were horrified. What, a theater in a cemetery? In a Beis Salem spielt nicht kein Theater. You don't have theater in a cemetery. But it turned out that the ghetto theater became very popular. And after the war, a physician, Mark Dvorzhetsky, who survived the ghetto and then German concentration camps, said, you know, the ghetto theater was very important because it was an important weapon against depression. Without that ghetto theater, a lot of Jews just would have become so paralyzed by depression, they would have given up. And the theater was not just a way of diverting your thoughts for a few hours, but the songs in the theater became very significant. A song like Moshe halt sich nicht verleil sich und gedenk mit Dafaois. Moshe, hold on, don't let go, remember you got to get out of here. Or a song about a 17-year-old girl singing in the ghetto theater. Pesha von Resha was the name of the cabaret. Weil ich hab als Charakter nicht nirgends sich verliere, weil ich hab als Charakter wie a Gilgul liegt in mir. Because I'm such a character, because I don't lose my head no matter what, because I have such a character, it's as if some dibuk is inside of me. And then she describes how she's going to survive no matter what. These were the songs that were composed in the ghetto, that were very high quality, and that played a very, very important role in enabling people to somehow husband their psychological resources. Now, we can talk a lot more about armed resistance, weapons, the Battle of the Warsaw Ghetto. I just say this, because otherwise I talk for another 2 hours, that the Battle of the Warsaw Ghetto was very important. And it was unique in that it had the support of the non-fighters. The 50,000 Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto basically supported the 750 fighters, 500 in the Jewish Fighting Organization, 250 fighting with the revisionists. And the Jews built 700 bunkers to hide out. And without those bunkers, the Jews would not have been able to have fought for so long. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, why was it that the ghetto uprising was supported by other Jews in Warsaw, but a few months later in Białystok and in Vilna, Jews who already knew about the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, when they had a choice between supporting fighters or listening to the Judenrat leaders, turned their backs on the fighters? The fighters in the Vilna Ghetto were called Pishers mit die Bixen, little pishers with guns. They were not regarded as heroes. They were regarded as a threat. And the reason why, and this is something to think about, is that in the Warsaw Ghetto, after Chernyakov committed suicide, there was a leadership vacuum, which was filled by the fighting organization. In Vilna and in Bialystok, you had Judenrat leaders who organized functioning ghettos. People weren't starving, epidemics were under control. Motka comes home from his tailoring shop in the Vilna or Bialystok ghetto and says the Wehrmacht has just given us 4 months more orders. We have 6 months worth of work to make uniforms. The Germans are losing battle after battle on the Eastern Front. Gens is organizing decent food supplies because he's in tight with the Lithuanians. The Lithuanians themselves now see where the wind is blowing. They're trying to make an alibi for themselves. And this little squirt, Abba Kovner, wants us to all go down in a blaze of glory. To hell with him. I don't want to die. I want to survive. And so, as long as you had that hope that we might live another day or 2 days, there was a great reluctance to fight. By the same token, if you had loved ones, children, parents, it was very hard to abandon them. Abba Kovner, when he left the ghetto to go into the partisans, had to abandon his mother, had to leave her, physically turn his back on her. And later on, Abba Kovner, interviewed on Israeli TV, by now he was a great partisan hero. He was then in the Haggadah, fought in the Israeli War of Independence, became a great Hebrew poet, helped design Beit HaTfutzot, the Diaspora Museum in Tel Aviv. Abba Kovner said, how should I be remembered? As the great hero or as the son who turned his back on his mother? And it's no accident that when you look at Jewish armed resistance to the Germans, often it's undertaken by young people who've already lost their parents, who don't have kids of their own. Or it's taking place in death camps like Treblinka, Sobibor, Auschwitz, where there's nothing to lose. Or it's happening at the very moment when the Germans are trying to kill you, as in many smaller ghettos. But it wasn't something that was undertaken lightly. And this is something that we have to keep in mind as we listen to these very often silly phrases such as Jews went like sheep to the slaughter.